Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. I'm Steve, and today we will be looking at the running back rankings for the 2022 Fantasy Draft. A couple points of order. First of all, any help with getting this YouTube channel more recognized is always appreciated. All the support is always great. So don't be afraid to do those YouTubey things. You know exactly what they are, as well as monetary support is definitely helpful too. So there is a link to the Patreon page down in the description below. And just so you know, all of the rankings for all of the positions are already up on the website, which is also in that description, www.theFFforge.com. Now, a few things about these, what you're looking at here on the screen. These are projections that I did based on how I thought teams would be employing their rosters this upcoming season from several months back, from shortly after the draft, after I did a bunch of work on looking at the coaches in the NFL, the new coaching changes, which there is a post up on Reddit under the FF Forge. I think it's I believe it's a dash, FF dash Forge is my Reddit name. And that is post, it was not a post, it was a comment on a post up there that you could find that people seemed to really like and find useful. So if you want to know about all of the changes and how they might affect teams and what they will look like in this coming year, I went into some pretty in-depth research onto the backgrounds of these coaches, what their influences will be. The other thing about the position, these right here, is that I will be putting them into tiers after I move some players around, some of them more than others. And with that, those tiers are based on some of the analysis that I did in the off season, these larger articles that are up on the website and previous video series that I did about draft strategy, where I ended up lumping players into tiers. So I will be using the amount of players that I put into those tiers as guides for the tiers that I create, the amount of players in the tiers here, and it usually lined up pretty nicely anyways with how I mentally would do this, but a little bit of a different process than I've done in previous years, so I will see how I like it compared to my old process once the season is over. Let's get into this. Starting right at the top, we're not going to mess with these three. We like that. I would say I would really probably, if I didn't need three to follow my system, almost would want to keep Jonathan Taylor out here, but at the same time, I'm good with him being in this tier. But whatever the case, my concern with Jonathan Taylor, I had him last season, and obviously he was great, but early on in the year, he could have been so much better. He could have been a RB1 that matched up with RB1s in previous years. I believe he's like the worst, had the least fantasy points scored for an RB1 in PPR or half PPR, or maybe both, maybe even non-PPR. I don't know for sure about that, but of any RB1 over the last like 6 years or something, I think I saw that from the CBS Sports app guys. Bringing that up too, I haven't listened to a whole lot of news this whole off season, as I had wanted to keep my opinions without being too influenced by just hearing the same things spouted from one fantasy analyst to the next. So there were some good things and some bad things about that. So there's always a possibility that I missed some big piece of news on something, but I get alerts and everything for the major stuff. So other than that, it's probably just little insider quips from the media, which I think they lead you astray just as often as you get good information from it. So at least you're getting my unadulterated opinions on some of these guys. I believe I cut myself off there. Jonathan Taylor, concerned with him, early season, they did not want to give him more than like 15 carries. Then they lost a game because of that fairly early on in the year, and then they lost two more around weeks like 6 and 7 or something like that. And after that, there was a total change where they would run him into the ground and run him at the end of games, get him into those 20 type carry games, and that's where he took off as a fantasy player. I don't think they want him to have those 20 plus carry games. I think that's why they brought in a tight end that we will see later on in this chart. I think they just didn't trust, what they had to come in and play, so they wanted Jonathan Taylor on the field, but they just kept passing, and yeah, I don't know that he has this upside to compete with Christian McCaffrey or Derrick Henry if that is the case, if their coaching staff does not want to have him just dominate the amount of carries that he was getting for the second half of last season. Moving on to the second tier is going to be a single guy who's all the way down here. We like that offense. We like the amount of touchdowns we could get. We like the talent. Just a solid dude. Probably not going to be an RB1 though, so that's where I really like having him in that second tier. Even in his best of seasons, it's a passing offense. It's not quite there for him. They pass too much to the receivers. In standard, I guess he could probably get enough touchdowns to be in that top 3 kind of conversation, but otherwise, just don't think that upside's there, which it probably is for a few of these guys. So up next, in this next tier, it is going to start off with Najee Harris. The main reason I don't have him higher, I wouldn't mind having him over Joe Mixon if Ben Roethlisberger was there again and they had like a slightly better offensive, well, not even slightly, a better offensive line. I do believe that they have brought in some pieces to help that offensive line out, so that's great. But now they have a quarterback who can throw more than 3 yards down the field. So there's going to be less reliance on just dumping the ball off to him 1,000 times. But great running back. Really excited about him. So being the 5th best ain't a problem. I had Nick Chubb here. That is from when I thought that what's his dirty face was going to be playing for them. So now I'm a little bit concerned how efficient that Cleveland offense is going to be. Nick Chubb is still great no matter what, but he will be moving behind Dalvin Cook. So it's Najee Harris, Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, and do we want him behind Austin Eckler would be the next question. I don't quite think so. Cleveland is still a run-first team. Nick Chubb is great, has been great there. He's proven himself that he can be a top 3 really type guy given if everything were to line up correctly for him. And that's where the concern comes in with losing their star quarterback and now having a quarterback that, if you saw my rankings for quarterbacks, I don't like. But Austin Eckler, I have a similar concern as Jonathan Taylor, also a guy that I had last year, both on the same team. That was awesome. Rest of my team, But Austin Eckler, I don't think he's going to have that same workload. They brought in a rookie as well, fairly high for running backs draft capital, and I think he'll be able to do what he's done in other seasons, which is a top 10, top 8, top 6 type guy, dependent on how the touchdowns flow, but I just don't think as much will be asked of him. A little bit of that ground opportunity will be taken away from him to help keep him healthier. He got a little bit banged up as the season went along, and you would kind of expect that to happen any given year. Then DeAndre Swift dropped him down a little ways, just it's really no fault of his own as much as not being able to put him up over these other guys, but like the projections. And I hate having Aaron Jones this low, but here's the biggest concern for having him this low would be he ends up working out in the slot a lot. They can't quite trust the wide receivers that they have, and they put 2 running backs on the field a lot of the time and almost use him as a, maybe 50% of the time in the slot or something like that. Then he could really, really jump up and have an excellent season. But otherwise, some of his groundwork will be getting eaten into, just like an Austin Eckler type receiver. And of course, there's some of that worry for DeAndre Swift. I moved Javonte Williams down, and that was because of the news that there might be some sort of split between him and Melvin Gordon. I still, even in these rankings with how high he was up, I believe I only gave him 60% of the groundwork, or I gave him 60% of the groundwork and Melvin Gordon like 60% of the passing work. Some sort of split like that. So I didn't even give him an insane amount of work, and he was still pretty darn high up in these projections. So I might have to slip Javonte Williams back up. I saw something that Melvin Gordon said that sounded a little bit less like a 50-50 split that was being taken away from some previous comments a couple weeks ago for him. So I don't know. David Montgomery is sort of like a Joe Mixon light. Just talented guy, tends to get a lot of the work. I know Khalil Herbert's good and all, but I don't think that he's good enough to keep David Montgomery off of the field. Still have a few guys to move ahead of Javonte. Alvin Kamara, I'm sure, much lower than a lot of people, so you have to put him in somewhere. The issue this year is that there are a lot of question marks for a lot of guys, and then the guys who maybe don't have as big of question marks just didn't have great seasons last year, like a Kamara or a Saquon. I don't even think Kamara's was that bad. Partially just trusting my projections on keeping him a little bit lower than one might think, but that is how that's going to break. So I had to get those two up here because just like this next guy, Ezekiel Elliott as well. So Zeke Elliott, too, had a rough year. I thought when I made these rankings that Zeke might be on the field with Tony Pollard more, I guess would be the main thing. I just thought they might get Tony Pollard more work because he was is an exciting player. But it seems like that might not necessarily be the case. So that was the reason for the projections for him being lower. I did not give him as huge of a percentage as I now expect. So move him up a little ways, should be healthier. And then Breece Hall will leave there, and that is where the tier cuts off. Now, Breece Hall, a slight bit of concern in the wind. I'm not really worried about kind of split work. I think he is more talented than Michael Carter. I think that he will prove that, and if it's not in the start of the season, I just think he'll get the majority of the work there, and I think he will do good with that, and I expect that offense to be better. Now their quarterback went down. Joe Flacco's a pretty solid backup to have, though, so that's good. Just hoping for that offense, thinking for that offense, that Zach Wilson will be better than he was in his rookie season, which should help open things up for a guy like Breece Hall. And so I'm going to keep him in that tier. I've been thinking about removing him because there's still some names here, but he did really good in the projections, and I like him. Now, J.K. Dobbins coming back from injury, a little concerning. Oh. Speaking of coming back from injury, while we're on the injury topic, Dalvin Cook is part of the reason I don't mind having him behind a couple of these guys here is that there's a fairly decent chance that he re-injures his shoulder, in which case, from what I understand, he would have to get season-ending surgery. A little concern there is part of the reason why I'm not forcing him up higher on the list and just kind of letting the projections keep him down a little bit more. So J.K. Dobbins right at the top of this tier. Absolutely love J.K. Definitely some concern for coming back from an injury with him. Love Baltimore's rushing attack as one of like the top 4 rushing attacks for me fantasy-wise, that when it can work, when it's going, their coaches will send it and keep rushing, and usually their star running back tends to get enough carries to be up there on a week in and week out basis. Anyways, up next was Lenny Fournette. I believe I ceded some of his workload to a running back that they brought in this offseason that I liked quite a bit. Don't know how that's shaking out or not. So depending on reporting, you could definitely move Leonard Fournette up a little bit if you wanted. A safe kind of guy, though. Love that Dameon Pierce is up here from the projections because I love him. But there's still some names we've got to get. So Josh Jacobs in that offense should definitely get enough touchdowns this season to maybe be a little less consistent in a good way than he was like last season. Super consistent last season, though. Just a solid option to have. Injury concern with him. He gets banged up easily a lot. And that's where Dameon Pierce comes in. So, love the rookie. Remember, these projections are from a long time ago. I don't know. Y'all had this freaking Rex Burkhead or something starting for this team. I don't know what that was. That's something I picked up as I started to look at the rankings and whatnot. And I'm like, nah. Dameon Pierce, well, unfortunately, I didn't get this out there before the news, but he's looking like he's going to be the starter there, and he will definitely be taking the workload, and Houston wants to run the ball. Unfortunately, I would have him higher. I would have him in that third tier, except once again, like I've mentioned in other videos, I really thought that John Mechie, rookie wide receiver they took this offseason in the draft high up, I thought that he was going to be that like missing piece in that offense that was really going to help it be an efficient offense. I'm not saying a superstar offense, but I thought he was really going to be helpful for that offense. They lost him. I don't think they have anyone else on the roster that could bring to that offense what he would have. So unfortunate. And so I had to knock him back because still might be a struggle getting some of those touchdowns, but I think he'll get enough opportunities to prove himself. And Kenny Walker just had some sort of surgery, so that is concerning, but I'm not going to move him off of this spot quite yet. Maybe we move Antonio Gibson up one spot. I'm not sure what's going on with Philadelphia with Miles Sanders and Kenneth Gainwell. I liked Kenny last season, then he bit me in the butt late season, but tried to use him 1 week after Miles Sanders went down. Miles Sanders was absolutely great last year, and I think he would be much higher in all of anybody's rankings, including mine, if he just got into the end zone even a little bit. He just never scored. And with Jalen Hurts, that might be a continuing issue. It's just frustrating because the other running backs would get touchdowns, but not Miles Sanders. I don't think that that's anything more than just how things happened. I don't think it's anybody's specific fault. So I expect him to have more touchdowns, but I just am a little bit concerned about the usage and if he will get as much of that usage as he was like last season even. Here is maybe a surprise. James Cook, I think, will be the starter in Buffalo. So Buffalo has drafted a new running back fairly highly in the last 3 drafts. James Cook being the most recent one of them, maybe the highest thought of from analysts, as far as draft analysts go, before the draft, out of the last 3. Now, last year, Zach Moss, the most recent one, maybe it's 3 of the last 4 years. Zach Moss was in the doghouse for the second half of the season for seemingly no reason. So that could have been some sort of team issue. I don't really know. He seemed to be productive enough while on the field. But whatever the case, they seem to not trust Singletary or him. And about mid-season last year, Buffalo realized that they need to tote the ball, and they started giving Singletary more of those options, a bigger portion of the opportunities, as well as just running more. And I think that trend will continue this season of utilizing a running back just a little bit more in their system. And I think that'll be James Cook. And I think he'll have the majority of those carries just based on reading the tea leaves. Here's one of the injuries that I feel like I may not have taken into consideration enough. An Achilles injury for James Robinson. I forgot that he was coming off of that while making my rankings. I do think he is the running back that they want in that running back role there. And as far as I know, I mean, he's not like expected to miss week 1. I'm not going to move him lower than other guys that I have because I do kind of like him in this spot, but just a little bit of throwing some caution into the wind there based on what you've heard. Maybe you've heard some things that I haven't as far as maybe throwing James Robinson back a little, but I do think that Travis Etienne, at least at one point, was definitely getting overdrafted. I think he is more of an exciting player who will get moved around, more, catch the ball more, but not be their primary running back, which you need to be in order to be a top, in those top 3 tiers at least for sure. And then tier 4, it starts to be iffy, dependent on touchdowns and whatnot. After James Robinson, the last 2 are going to be Arizona's old league mates here, James Conner and Chase. So Tony Pollard, like I said about Ezekiel Elliott, I had him projected for a little more work than it looks like he's going to end up getting. Although with those wide receiver injuries, things aren't looking good coming into week 1. Like it's going to be 4 or 5 weeks before some of those, I think there's 2 injuries that may not be ready for week 1. If that's looking like that's going to be a longer term issue, then I would move Tony Pollard up, because just like I talked about Aaron Jones, he may end up just getting on the field and being moved around to the slot and whatnot, out of the backfield a fair amount with both him and Elliott on the field. Otherwise, James Conner is down a little bit further because Arizona hasn't typically liked to use a single running back until late last season, when they really had no other running backs that they trusted on their roster. Other than that, it's always been like a 60-40 kind of split between 2 guys that play like a very specific role. I can't think of the coach's name. He's really a role specific like kind of coach, which I don't love it. I think it's a potentially exciting system that he uses for the NFL, but just maybe doesn't use it to its max. It's a little too rigid. And then Chase Edmonds from Miami. I didn't really have to move him up much, huh? Definitely have split him some with Raheem Mostert though. So if Chase Edmonds is like, here's the thing about the Miami running backs: Chase, Raheem Mostert, maybe even their third back, probably Gaskin. I thought there was maybe somebody else. Either way, they're all kind of little injury concern type guys you might not want to give the full load, but Chase Edmonds has definitely been fantasy relevant when he's gotten opportunities, so he's a guy I could not argue with someone, depending on exactly what's coming out of the preseason information, if you wanted to move him up into this Antonio Gibson, top 20 type of running backs. Which brings us to our 5th tier, and we'll just keep Tony Pollard up there and A.J. Dillon. We're on to some of the high-end backups who also get work here. Same with Cordell Patterson. I do not expect him to be the running back as far as playing the running back role. They brought in Tyler Algier, who I expect, at least at the time of making this, and I think I've heard news just recently that this seems to maybe be the plan, if possible, that Tyler Algier will be, the first down, second down type running back, and Cordell Patterson will probably be in, depending on the formation, as well as on third downs, would be my guess there. And I believe I made my percentages to kind of represent that. Then Kareem Hunt, who knows what's going on with that? So I don't forget about this later, if Kareem Hunt gets traded or holds out or something, if news on that gets more drastic, Dearness Johnson should and would be in my 8th tier if I forget to do that. He would become a must-have type backup for Nick Chubb. And we're going to finish this tier out with Elijah Mitchell, another guy who should possibly be higher, but with Deebo Samuel having contract incentives to run the ball, which I did not think he would agree to. I don't necessarily think he should have, but money, who's going to turn down extra money? So money talks a lot. So Deebo agreed to certain incentives in his contract to be, as far as rushing statistics go. I understand why he wanted to leave San Francisco, because they want him to be rushing the ball of more than he should. Not good on his body. As a wide receiver, you can have, especially with his body type, you can have a much longer career than most running backs ever do. And, being in that running back role, you could see him, it took a toll on his body already by the end of last year. I'm sure they don't plan to use him to that extent, but that takes a little bit away from a guy like Elijah Mitchell, along with the fact that they drafted another running back and they have the rookie from last year. A lot of question marks there. So I think I spread those percentages around in my projections a little bit like butter. At the top of the 6th tier will be Clyde. We're just going to form these up here first. Okay, so first things I did, I had to move up some guys. So KC brought in like a stable of running backs and Rojo, which is why I had to, I don't know if it'll make it into the cut, but I had to move CEH up from being a little bit lower. Much of these guys, a few of these guys I did. They don't seem to have full trust with CEH. They've brought in some other talent, but Rojo's not looking too promising. So that's definitely a good sign for Clyde. Wouldn't argue if you wanted to put him up in this 5th tier, but if I have to make some sort of cutoff, got a little bit more faith in the guy who did better last year, in Elijah Mitchell. And then Damian Harris from Andre Stevenson broke up their workload, and they came up to be pretty darn close in the projections. So this isn't really a case of I don't know what to do with them as much as I think New England wants to run the ball. I think power run is the name of the game for them, and let their defense be, refreshed and ready when they're on the field, and just beat up some of these smaller teams that have been drafting to play against the high passing league that the NFL is these days, and just kind of counter that. So, expect them to eat into each other, but also definitely be relevant, both of them. Stevenson might be a better running back than Damian Harris even. And then Melvin Gordon coming in, makes sense. Could be higher, could be lower, but this is roughly where he ended up with the projections. And I stopped there because then we come into Rachaad White. So this is where I thought at the time, and I'm not convinced it's not going to be the case, that he might be able to come in and take away some of the work from Leonard Fournette. Same with Tyler Algier. Expect him to come in, be the kind of first, second down type running back for Atlanta. Then we've got Darrell Williams. So similar with Darrell Williams, like I said, they always do like this 60-40 split there for their running backs. So that's where he ended up. And then Keontae Ingram. So that's why all these Arizona running backs are quite close up here from the 26th. I split up passing work and rushing work, and this is what came out of it. I think they all could get some work. So Isaiah Spiller jumps ahead of maybe more of these guys than he should, due to some of these guys like a J.D. McKissick are just going to be guys who will have good games, but you'll never be able to predict when they are, and it's total luck. And when the lead rusher goes down, they are not going to be the guy to take on that role as the lead rusher. They will continue in their role as the receiving / third down type running backs for their teams. So Isaiah Spiller, I expect to get some run on, second, maybe situational more so than specific down work to help offset and keep Austin Eckler healthier. So you'll see here I'm moving Rashad Penny quite a ways up, and that more so has to do with, in case I'm wrong on Kenny Walker, then, there's that potential that I am, and Rashad Penny is like the starter there. They both have soft tissue injuries at the moment, but I think it'll be Kenny Walker. But it's at some point you have to say, what if I'm wrong? when there's not a sure bet either way yet. And then New England's rookie, Pierre Strong, I thought that he would come in at the time of making these and take over whatever would be left in that offense of James White's offense. I think obviously since James White retired, that's definitely going to be the case. So I don't know if that role will still exist in the new offense, but I don't know that they're going to be reinventing the wheel this season since they don't even have an offensive coordinator. So I like the upside to Pierre Strong as being a receptions demon, and I love the talent too, I guess is the thing. So if he gets that opportunity, I think he could definitely make some fantasy use out of it and break open for a few big plays type of thing. Then Daryl Henderson and Cam Akers, I pretty much have splitting the work, and I split those two up with. So a lot of these guys are kind of just making up for if I'm wrongs or whatnot at this point, in this tier in general. Okay, so moving on to these three, I think Los Angeles will be a running back by committee. Based on what I gave them, Daryl Henderson, Cam Akers ended up coming neck to neck in the projections. I tend to like the slight receiving upside of Daryl Henderson, along with the fact that he's not coming back from an Achilles injury, and I did not love what I saw from Cam Akers other than that first game back last season. And Travis Etienne, smashing in here as a guy that I could definitely be wrong on type thing, so didn't want him to fall down anymore in my rankings. And that leads us to the 7th tier, which will start to be getting out of that if I'm wrong on and move into more so the injury replacement guys that I want on my team, which I put ahead of tier 8, which tier 8 will be the J.D. McKissicks of the world, the guys who at the end of the year, their fantasy point output looks better than their usefulness is on a week-to-week basis for fantasy, because you just never know when they're going to have their big games. Type guys. The guys who also have no upside as being the runner, even if the starter, if Antonio Gibson goes down, it's not J.D. McKissick that's going to get all that work. Okay, so here is our 7th tier. I just went ahead and put them all together, cut some of that out in between. This tier is especially 0 RB type rosters. This is where you're going to want to pull a couple of guys from, in my belief, as well as, obviously getting some actual starters. But we got Gus Edwards at the top here. If we knew what that offense was going to look like this year a little bit better, I expect Gus Edwards could outperform this position, but just after last season, who knows what kind of changes might be made. Who knows how he and J.K. Dobbins will be feeling. They just might not be effective enough for Baltimore to rely on that rushing attack as much as they have in the past. We'll see. Michael Carter, obviously some upside if Breece Hall were to go down, but this is more of a in case I'm wrong type thing, putting him here as much as anything. But also, I think the projections probably had him around here. Don't expect him to not get any work. So there is at least a little bit of usefulness from him with potential upside to what I expect from that usefulness. And then Kenny Gainwell, similar to Michael Carter essentially. Alexander Madison, the single best backup running back to have. Somebody dropped him in my league last year, and I got some good use from him by picking him up. And then Hassan Haskins, make no doubt about it, if Derrick Henry goes down again this season, Hassan is the guy. He's a big dude. That's what they drafted him for. They did not have a backup last season for when their bruiser went down, and they need a bruiser in that offense to do what they want to do. They don't want to win games by 100 points. They just want to win the game at the end of the day. It's all that matters to them. Devontae Price, there is the guy who I expect to take a little bit of that workload, or expected. They did bring in a running back, I can't remember who it is, a veteran who's pretty solid, and Devontae Price has not had a chance to do a whole lot of work with the team up until very recently. So when I looked into things, there wasn't a whole lot of news on him. But I think he would be the Jonathan Taylor type backup guy if he can earn that role. And I think he would at least by a certain point in the season. So as long as Jonathan Taylor doesn't get injured in like the first 4 or 5 weeks, I wouldn't be surprised if he's that backup anyways, and he'll get a little bit of work in that offense as a sub to get Jonathan Taylor back down to the 16-ish carries a game maybe. Jamal Williams, another guy who gets some work, but or if your starter goes down, a good guy to have. He's a really good running back. Ronald Jones just not willing to drop out of here quite yet based on reports. We'll see if he ends up getting cut from the team or not. If he gets cut, obviously, don't draft him here, but definitely some risk. Um, Devin Singletary, expect him to get a little bit of work, and if starter were to go down, same story. Brian Robinson Jr., same thing. Not a bad backup to have. Same with Zamir White. If Jacobs goes down, and both of those guys have some injury concerns, Jacobs definitely just always banged up. So Zamir White, I believe, would be the guy to come in and be the replacement for him, not the old Detroit's draft pick from years ago who was with Carolina last year. Not him or JD or Kenyon Drake. No, who's their other? Yeah, not him or Kenyon Drake. They're more the receiving guys for them. And then Khalil Herbert, same thing. He might actually, we'll see if they want to put two running backs out there, he might actually get some amount of workload and maybe take a little bit out of the start of theirs. Deonta Foreman, I guess, I don't think they trust Chuba Hubbard after last year. He looked pretty good with Tennessee, so I think they brought him in case starter goes down. So, I kind of like that enough that I put him up here. Same with Samaje Perine. Although I did hear some sort of news, and I don't remember which way it went, but I thought it went counter to what I expected. That Chris Evans, who I think is a super, super talented running back, did good in a limited amount of opportunities one game. That Samaje, or Chris Evans, I guess, would be the actual backup to Joe Mixon if Joe Mixon went down, and Samaje was like the third down guy, but that wouldn't make sense to me, so I don't know where I saw that report, unfortunately, anymore. And then my 8th tier is going to be J.D. McKissick, Kenyon Drake, Nyheim Hines, and Rex Burkhead. They'll get on the field and have points every game, 2, 3, maybe a touchdown to add on to that, and twice, maybe a season, they're going to have really good games. And then somebody's going to pick them up and start them the next week. And they're going to have another 2 or 3 point game. So I don't want those guys really in any situation. If you're running, if you feel more comfortable having somebody like this on your roster in like a 0 RB league or just as a backup, those are just kind of the guys that are the best of those types of options compared to holding on to like an Alexander Madison who may not even get a single carry in a game while Cook is healthy. So that's kind of what that tier is. I really don't like those guys, but at least they do have that upside. It's just luck based. And then from that point, it's pretty much my projections on down. Since I kicked Raheem Mostert out, I guess he's on top of that compared to what I had. See if there's any names. I do like Snoop. Kieran Williams was the other Rams running back that I said I gave a little bit of work and that I thought that's going to be a running back by committee there. Gaskin, I definitely gave a little bit of work. Same with Giovanni Bernard in those systems. Sort of third down guys that probably won't even be out there on every third down. More of a game plan type thing. If I'm wrong about Hassan Haskins, Dontrell Hillier's good backup. Marlon Mack, I just don't see it. He struggled coming back last season. He didn't look good when he came back. Could be healthy now, but that's not what I heard out of camp so far for him. There's Chris Evans. Don't forget Dearness Johnson, especially if Kareem Hunt goes down or isn't a factor anymore in Cleveland, he would be a great backup. He would be up there with some of the better backups to hold just based on how much that offense likes to run and how he did last year with the opportunity that he got. I just ended my recording moments ago for like no reason without saying goodbye. I love you. Thank you so much for enjoying this video. Once again, all the rankings for all the positions are up on the website. These should be released every day, I believe. But up next will be... I'll do DSTs last. So the wide receiver position should be next. And I'll throw my kickers in with the DSTs. Is that every position? I don't know. But thank you very much. Take care. Love you. Goodbye.